Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Biz Bites Live. I'm your host, Anthony McMahon from the IT Psychiatrist, and my guest today is Alex McNaughton from Strategic Sales Consulting. Welcome, Alex.
Hey Anthony, how are you?
Very well, thanks. And yourself?
Yeah, keeping well as can be in lockdown anyway.
Absolutely. You look to have a pretty good setup there with the sun coming in on one angle, the forest on the other. We had a rain shower out in West Auckland not too long ago, so it might be coming your way.
Yeah, I think it's hit us. I think it's hit us here in Takapuna. There was bit of a drizzle going on about an hour ago.
Excellent. Well, I mean, we've had a good run with the weather, so we can't complain about a little bit of rain. So
No.
strategic sales consulting. Talk to me a little bit about what your business model is during normal activity.
Yeah, sure. Look, not a great deal has changed for me, to be honest, other than the ability to not actually sit in a client's office, which I was doing for a couple of my clients on a pretty regular basis. But look, my firm, I started it about a year and a half ago to address the sales capability gap in New Zealand, particularly in the tech industry. So, there's some awesome innovation that comes out of New Zealand, some super, super clever people building really cool stuff. Um, but the sales capability gap that's there has sort of limited some of the success for some of those companies in terms of their growth and in terms of reaching their full potential and ultimately helping people with their solution. So, look, I help companies across sales strategy, sales process improvement, and then building sales capability within teams as well.
And it's a very valuable skill within that you're touching on, Alex. In a recent podcast episode that hasn't yet gone live, but I was recording it earlier this week where I was interviewing Angela Waddell from Sprout New Zealand. We touched on or talked about the fact that startups are often a couple of people, two or three people in their garage. They've got specific skills around developing a product, but they may not have those other well-rounded skills around building a business and running a business. So sales is something that they've never done before. Suddenly they find themselves in a
Yeah.
position to sell. So those are the kind of people you're looking to help, aren't you?
That's right. So, look, I've helped businesses kind of from that really early traction stage to get to their first six figures revenue, or from the ones who are kind of have had some decent success and, maybe have a few $100,000 or $500,000 in revenue. And it's how do we step change to that next level of operating capability and get to seven figures and beyond. So absolutely. And that's, you touched on there, a really common challenge is that a lot of these founders don't have a background, a customer facing background or a sales background. And particularly if you're selling B2B, and particularly if you're selling to bigger organizations in a more complex, long sales cycle, that can be really challenging. It's tough when you've been doing it for years. It's even harder if you've never done it before. So yeah, absolutely helping those kind of businesses.
And some of those early sales, I mean, my first sale with the IT Psychiatrist was just a case of being right place, right time. And that's what happens with some of those early sales. Where it happens so quickly, there's an element of luck, element of being in the right place at the right time, that you can get too comfortable thinking that it's always going to be that easy, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I've seen this play out, and I'll paint the picture. I won't use the company name, but I'll paint the picture of what it can look like if that goes on too long. So, we imagine a startup, they find some early success. They, through luck and determination and hustle, get their first clients and they start to get a bit of traction. Then they'll go hire a salesperson and they'll get a bit more success and they'll grow a little bit bigger. So they'll think, okay, let's double down on that. Let's hire another salesperson. So they'll do that and they'll keep going and keep going. But what they'll see is their per rep efficiency for those salespeople suddenly just goes down and down and down because there's no cohesive strategy and there's nothing that was put in the early stages in terms of fundamental sales operational capability to enable success at scale. So it's really crucial to get that right. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a team of salespeople who are just doing really, really rubbish numbers per rep, and your kind of efficiency just goes down massively. So I've seen that with a lot of companies at kind of various stages in their journey, and that's what I try and help other companies avoid or remedy if they're already in that state.
Nice. And it's in the name, strategic sales consulting. So your focus is bringing a sales plan or an organization's sales plan in line to their strategy, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's right. So we always work backwards from what are you trying to achieve? What is the goal? And then we work backwards from there to put in place the strategy and then go a level deeper. Okay, what are the tactical things that need to be done to actually achieve on that?
And that's certainly where I've enjoyed the conversations we've had previously to date, because my focus with the IT psychiatrist is very similar, not from a sales perspective, but from technology enablement and technology planning, is making sure that my clients and the customers I work with take their technology plan and align it to their strategic business goals, but also to their other strategic plans. So if they've got a sales plan, if they've got a marketing plan, how can technology enable that? What systems can they use that will enable that as well?
Absolutely. And that's all part of it, right? Sales operations isn't just the strategy and the people and the processes. It's actually also the technology that brings that together. So you'll understand, the CRM, what email automation you're using, and what are the other technology pieces, the glue that makes everything else work together smoothly.
And that's something that certainly can't be overlooked by any business, is that you can't isolate elements of the plan. They've just got it. They actually have a value chain, and they have to interlock if you want them to be effective.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And every function in a business, whether you're a 2 or 3 man team or a big business, 100, 200, 1,000 staff, every function needs to work in synergy with the other functions for success to happen.
So how about sales, the relationship between sales and marketing? Do you feel with the companies you work with that it's understood what that relationship and what those distinctions are? Or are you finding that there's a little bit of work up front to do to link a marketing plan and a sales plan together?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And I've had this conversation with like virtual CMOs and marketers before, as well as tech companies and founders. And I guess I see a few kinds of scenarios. One where businesses and founders kind of look at sales and marketing as the same thing, and they just put it all into this one bucket. The other scenario is where they're working, marketing's over here, sales is over here, and they're not really working together. What you do want is absolutely that cohesion. Sales needs to be feeding into marketing. Marketing needs to be feeding back into sales, and vice versa. And a really good example of this is in terms of sales collateral or sales enablement material. You know, the sales team, or if it's just the founder doing it, that founder needs to be thinking, okay, what can I use to add value during the sales journey? Is it a case study? Is it a white paper? What's going to be useful? Is it more video content? But that's only going to happen if you have that conversation with marketing. And the same thing around inbound strategy, right? So, it's all well and good having your inbound strategy and your kind of inside sales team set up, but it doesn't work unless there's some leads coming in from marketing. So there needs to be that conversation all the time.
Absolutely. And you can't just assume that a good salesman is going to be a good marketer, or vice versa either. You've got to appreciate that they are two interlinked but different skill sets.
Oh, completely. Look, I, just use me as an example. Like, I understand selling really well, but my marketing understanding is much more high level, and I'll never claim to be a marketer because it is a totally different skill set. And the way I like to think about it is I specialize in helping businesses once things are in the funnel, and marketing is all about getting stuff in the top of that funnel. So once it's in there, that's where I can help businesses out.
Definitely. And the best distinction I've seen between the two is that the purpose of marketing is to get people into your front door, to get them to the front door in the first place and then walk in. The job of the sales team is to get them to fill that shopping cart and walk out the door with purchases.
Exactly. That's a good one.
Yeah. So massive disruption underway at the moment, not just in New Zealand, but globally. Obviously, we're recording this during the national New Zealand lockdown period. We need a better name for it, but we'll get to that. That's for the marketing team to come up with. For you, in your view, is it important that businesses continue to sell through this period, or
Yeah,
should they be putting a stop on the sales process?
it's such a good question. It's something I've been asked a lot recently. And the way the way that I think is the best way to think about this is if you have something right now, whether it's a product or a service that can genuinely help people, then you're ethically obligated to do that and help as many people as you can. And the only way you can really do that, unless you just give away everything for free, which is not realistic for 99.9% of businesses out there, is to keep selling and to keep speaking to your customers and to do everything you can to get in front of them. Now, what I will say is you can't be doing it in the same way you were in January and February. You've got to think about and be a bit smarter with your approach and more empathetic with your approach, because a lot of people's worlds have been turned upside down by this whole situation.
Absolutely, and not just their worlds, but their cash flow, their income streams,
Yeah.
everything. It's just everything's interrelated, and it's what we're seeing. Even if you're not an economic student, you're learning a lot about the economy. Yeah. So, what would you say? 3 tips for anyone that you're working with at the moment, in terms of how they can adjust their sales process to fit the current climate and probably the next 2 to 3 quarters, where the economy is going to be flattened as a result.
Yeah, sure. I'll just back it up and just explain what I think most businesses are thinking about right now. I'd love to get your feedback on that, and then I'll get to
Definitely.
the tips because they're all kind of interrelated. Um, so what I'm seeing, and please feel free to feed into this, but I'm seeing most people, business owners, execs, or even just families, right? People are reducing discretionary spending. So it's what can we stop paying for immediately to reduce our costs in the short term? And we were speaking about this earlier, right? I'm not paying for my shared office space right now. I cancelled that immediately because why would I? I can't. I'm not there. I'm not able to use it. The second thing that I'd say most business owners and execs and people in general are thinking about is how can we reduce the cost of the essential things that we do still need? So in other words, what can we do to extend our business runway by reducing our current spend on those essential items? And maybe that's negotiating with current providers, or maybe that's looking elsewhere. And a really simple example of that is, you're going to the supermarket right now, and I think a lot of people, rather than buying the premium products, are probably going home brand to save a little bit of extra money. And then I guess the third thing there is reducing downside risk. So, what can we do to reduce our exposure to the market as much as possible right now in the short term, but also thinking about the future of our businesses as well. And I guess the last thing, which kind of is the summary of all of the above, is everyone's doing what everyone else is doing. The natural human instinct is just to kind of follow. So there's that comfort in numbers. So I'd say those are probably the things I'm seeing. I don't know. Would you add anything there?
Yeah, I'd probably add in there one thing that's been a theme through some of the other conversations I've been having in the last week and a half, is the need to communicate in an open and transparent way, with customers, upstream and downstreams, customers and suppliers. Yeah, we're all in it together, and you can very easily go into a siloed view where all the impacts are bad and I'm going to shut down, or I'm not shut down literally, but figuratively, and we're not going to talk to anyone about the problems, when actually, when you're in business, it's important to communicate. It's important because plans and sales plans and everything can be adjusted to fit the needs of a client or a lead at any given time, right?
That's a really good point. I think communication is something that most people are doing quite well at the moment. I'd say is a lot of people are communicating, and looking for ways to connect through like this or in other ways. So yeah, that's been good to see actually. And then back to your original question around like what are the things that you can do right now to actually improve your success, I guess, in the market, if in selling your product or service. I think step one, you need to be looking at how you're speaking to the market. So look at your message, assess your message. So what you are doing in a growth market is likely not going to be working right now. So think about what sort of language you're using to describe your product or service. Is it a nice to have or a must have? Or a nice analogy is it a vitamin or a supplement or a painkiller? And then also look at how you're pricing. Are you a premium offering with other suppliers out there who offer the same or similar at much lower priced? Or are you considered quite affordable? So I'd say that will be the first place to start. Then from there, what you're going to want to do is, try and amplify that messaging. So adapt it. And look at a nice way to frame this is what can you do to help your customers and your potential customers through the rough waters right now that we're all in. So step one, reduce any kind of language that signals are nice to have. Don't talk about growth and 12-month plans and all the rest of it. Focus your messaging more on things like cost reduction or extending runways or risk mitigation. And also think about your time frames that you're talking about, shorten them, because I think people are much more, 1 month, 2 month focused right now than they are 12 months, 24 months focused. And then also look at your pricing too.
Yeah,
and think about reevaluating.
Would you say?
Sorry, you were going to say something?
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to jump in there. Would you say that it's critical in looking at that, or not critical? Critical is probably the wrong word. That it's necessary to consider a tiered pricing model for the same product at the moment?
Look, that's going quite deep in terms of the mechanics of pricing. It really does depend on what your solution is and who your customer is. All I'd say is on that is try and keep things simple. And I'm about to touch on this in terms of how you price. Be as simple and trying to transparent as you can be. Negotiations back and forth right now are just not, it adds friction to the process. So as simple and transparent as you can be is probably my best advice there.
Nice. And I think that's two elements of advice that are critical for any time of the year, open and transparent around what people are getting for their money and the value behind it as well. It's easy to fall back into the old habits of, well, this is just what the price is and go with it. But if you're transparent and honest, people can understand it a lot more. Yeah,
exactly. Absolutely. And look, beyond that whole messaging piece, then I'd say key things to think about are, touched on transparency there. Basically, just try and reduce any kind of barrier to doing business with you as much as you can. So even things like, and I see this quite often with clients, is that their original kind of terms and conditions and contracts are quite cumbersome. And they're not designed with the customer in mind. They're all about protecting you, but they actually don't consider what's good for the customer. And you've got to find a balance there because, of course, you've got to protect your own business, but you've got to find a balance there and think about taking out or changing clauses that are clearly just barriers and going to slow things down. And then make negotiating simple. Look, there's often negotiating in business unless you have a really standardized offer. But make it simple. And, a nice way to think about it is just be open about what is important to you in terms of your levers of discounting. So the really common ones are, length of commitment, timing of the deal, timing of payment, those kind of things. Be really open and honest about that. And just, rather than, $1,000, no, I'll do it for 500, no, 750, because that's not productive. Just try and have that conversation in a more structured and an open way.
And it's not quite the same example as to where you're going, but in terms of the terms and conditions, like you say, and the languaging about it, it was a real world scenario I had yesterday where had to pop out to the supermarket and pop out sort of once upon a time. That was literally get in the car, go, come home, to grab some essential items yesterday. And while I was standing in queue waiting to my pop out to the supermarket, I happened to be reading the terms and conditions for parking in the supermarket car park. And it was an A3 billboard. The print would have probably been about size 12, 12-point font on a large billboard, and it was nailed or screwed to a wall where hardly any people would see it, and it was low down, so it was hard to see and hard to define. And this is how long I was in the supermarket car park for. I was able to read through the terms in the car park, and at no point did it have the customer in there. Yeah, it talked about it was basically covering all liability of the supermarket and indemnifying them of anything, but it didn't think about the customer perspective. It didn't have the old sign of parking at this car park at your own risk kind of thing in big bold font, which most people would understand anyway. And, like I say, it's not quite the same comparison, but it does tie into what you're talking about. It's transparency again. It's honesty. It's having something at knee height and very small print is not honest and transparent.
No. And things like that will slow down a deal. I remember I was working for an American software company a few years ago, and it would have been about 3-4 years ago now, and had been working on a specific deal for about 12 months. And then the contract negotiations took another 3 or 4 months on top of that because of little clauses throughout the contract that just slowed the deal down, and lawyers get involved, and it's frustrating. And stuff like that can be avoided or at least mitigated to a point by just being a bit more thoughtful about your terms and conditions. So I'd always say to business owners and founders or sales directors and so on, yes, your lawyer will put together a contract for you, but go over it and have a look through and try and think about it from the customer perspective and think about how you can still protect yourself, but position things in a nicer way and a better way. So I think that can definitely help. And your supermarket example, spot on. That's a bad example. That's how not to do it.
Yeah, definitely. And it seems to be a common thing, not for supermarkets, but for any car park. You drive into a council car park in the CBD. There's terms and conditions for parking there. No one reads them because no one's got time to read them. But no one wants to read them either. People just want to. From a customer perspective, you just want to get in, park your car, come back to that car in the same condition it was when you left it, and leave. You're not going to spend a vast amount of time reading the conditions of entry at the same time.
No, exactly. And then just bring it back to your original question. I think the final thing that's really useful for, if you're still, if you're trying to sell right now, is just be a bit more understanding and empathetic towards people. And people are hurting, right? And whether you are or your customer is, they will know someone who is if it's not them personally. So be understanding, think about your approach, stop talking about I and me so much, and focus your messaging and your approach on the client, on the prospect. And look, be understanding if things that you thought were going to sign in March haven't. Look for ways to be accommodating as much as possible, using things like creative payment terms or rejigging of offers if that's appropriate. But then also be understanding if people just need a month. They need to just catch their breath, and there's other stuff on. And then the final thing would be show extra love to your existing clients, because you want to reduce churn as much as possible. So do what you can, add, additional value, go above and beyond right now, and communicate. And, I think that's really important. And look above, and kind of overarching all of this, I'd just say be positive. Things are tough right now and a bit more difficult, but you've got to remember that it won't last forever, and that there's still opportunity out there. Business is still being done. New businesses are being started still. And some of the most successful businesses in the world today were started in the midst of recessions. So, you've got to try and keep a positive frame of mind as much as possible.
Absolutely. I think on your point there, I saw an infographic the other day of some of the businesses that are thriving today that were started in the GFC in 2008, and I can't
Yep.
remember all of them that were on there, but Slack, the collaboration communication channel, is one of them. Its genesis was in the GFC.
Yep. Oh, look, there were many. I think Airbnb was one of them. Uber, I believe, was as well. McDonald's was started in one of the worst economic times. So look, there's always opportunity, and there's always the silver lining.
Absolutely, it's ultimately it's going to come down to the companies that have identified a problem that can be solved or a customer need to fulfill and are able to solve that problem or fulfill that need. They're the ones that are going to be successful. So I guess the guidance I'll give to anyone there who's thinking this is my chance to shine is don't just expect everything will be fine because other companies have been successful. Solve a problem, find a need, deliver on that, and give people what they want.
Exactly. I love that.
Alex, it's been a fantastic chat today, and we'll probably get you back on to have another chat once things return to normal, once the ship gets rightened again. But in the meantime, if anyone is looking for some help in their sales process development, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Best way to get in touch with me is either find me on LinkedIn, Alex McNaughton. I think I'm the only one, so it should be easy. And other than that, you can flick me an email at alex@strategicsalesconsulting.co.nz or find me on my website as well. So yeah, look, always looking forward to helping businesses and people succeed.
Perfect. And while this is live at the moment, obviously it's going to be preserved for forever on the internet once it's saved. So I will put those links. I'll put a link to your profile and a link to, or I'll put your email address in the commentary as well around it, so that people can find you again.
Perfect. Yeah, that'd be amazing. No, I really enjoyed today.
Yeah, thanks very much for your time. It's been awesome catching up. And there's so many people I'm talking to at the moment that I probably will be doing this for about 6 months. But once we get out of lockdown, it'd be great to sit down and carry the conversation on face to face as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Look forward to doing it over a coffee.
Yeah, definitely. Alrighty. Well, thanks, Alex, and thank you everyone for watching. This has been another episode of BizBytes Live. If you like the content, please remember to follow or subscribe. We're on Facebook and YouTube. And equally, if you have a topic that you would like to discuss, please get in touch with me through either Facebook or via Anthony at the itpsychiatrist.co.nz. And we can talk about seeing if we can get you on the channel as well. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.